I wanted my money back. It was very disappointing.
They are pretending like Rachel Zegler is the first of them all when she looks like Lord Farquaad in the film.
The Snow White version is woke and feminist and progressive.
Rachel Zegler, like so many kids raised on TikTok, she's all for infantada is the only global solution.
If you've ever trusted a first reaction by anybody in the media, please go look at the list of names of people who hyped this up as a good movie and make sure you never take their opinions seriously ever again.
The movie has a major identity crisis.
This is just so typical of the left. The progressives always finding a way to find their way back to doing something not progressive.
Disney has spent over $1.5 billion remaking its animated classics. But in all that time, no remake has crashed into controversy quite like Snow White. What started as a nostalgic reboot turned into a lightning rod for backlash, and Rachel Zegler found herself right in the middle of the storm. Her interviews went viral. Fans were outraged. Then Bill Maher stepped in, and what he said, it hit a nerve that even Disney couldn't ignore. This isn't just a failed movie, it's a perfect example of what happens when Hollywood pushes too far. So what exactly happened? Did Rachel Zegler sabotage the film with her words? Stick around because the ending to this story says everything. When Rachel Zegler was first announced as the new Snow White, it was a moment meant to celebrate diversity. A young, talented Latina actress stepping into the shoes of one of Disney's most iconic princesses. It could have been a big win. But things took a sharp turn the moment Zegler started talking about the original film. In multiple interviews, she called the 1937 classic weird, super outdated, and made it clear she didn't like the story of a girl waiting for her prince to rescue her. Instead, she said her version of Snow White would be a leader, someone who wasn't dreaming about love, but about power. On paper, that might sound like progress, but to many fans, it came across as condescending, like she was trashing the story that made the character famous in the first place. And worse, she seemed to take a jab at the prince too, calling him a guy who stalks Snow White. That one quote alone spread like wildfire online. People weren't just annoyed, they were angry. It wasn't about politics or identity, it was about tone. It felt like she was too good for the role she was playing, and instead of celebrating a fairy tale, she seemed to be mocking it. Then came Bill Maher. You may not always agree with him, but one thing's certain, he doesn't hold back. On Real Time, Maher addressed the Snow White drama head-on, and he didn't tiptoe around it. He called the remake a perfect example of what happens when art becomes activism. He mocked the idea of rewriting a story just to fit a modern agenda. According to Maher, trying to fix classic tales by making them preachy only ends up ruining what made them great. His audience laughed, they clapped, and it was clear he was saying what a lot of people had been thinking but didn't want to say out loud. Maher wasn't just criticizing the film, he was questioning a broader trend in Hollywood. He pointed out that by trying to appease every social cause, filmmakers often end up alienating the audience they're trying to impress. Instead of focusing on the art of storytelling, they're focused on ticking boxes and satisfying a checklist of modern values. What happened to simply telling a good story? Maher's criticism resonated with millions who felt the same way, but didn't have a platform to speak out. And it's exactly why his commentary made headlines. At the core of this mess was a bigger conversation about what happens when studios try to update something that maybe doesn't need fixing. Disney didn't just cast a new Snow White, they reshaped the entire story. The Seven Dwarfs, replaced by magical creatures of various backgrounds. The romantic subplot, scrapped in favor of a strong, independent heroine. Even the visuals leaned away from the classic fairy tale aesthetic. And while the goal may have been inclusion and modern values, the result felt like a film made more to score political points than to tell a good story. Now, diversity in storytelling matters. Everyone deserves to see themselves on screen, but audiences can tell when something feels forced. And Snow White felt like it was trying so hard not to offend anyone that it lost all its charm. Instead of enchantment and whimsy, it became a checklist of modern talking points. People didn't walk away inspired, they walked away confused, and in some cases, offended for totally different reasons. It didn't help that Zegler had been outspoken on social media before the film even came out. Her comments on politics, particularly her criticism of Donald Trump and support for Palestine, put her in the middle of even more controversy. While she has every right to speak her mind, the internet has a long memory. Her statements were dug up and turned into ammunition by those who already had a problem with the film. And suddenly the backlash wasn't just about Snow White, it was personal. Behind the scenes, production was a mess too. According to recent reports, the film had a massive carbon footprint, racking up more emissions than some action-packed superhero blockbusters. The cost of creating the magical world was enormous, and delays only made things worse. Disney had high hopes for the movie, but the negative press, the memes, the outrage, it all added up. By the time it hit theaters, the excitement had turned into mockery. And the numbers proved it. Snow White opened with just $43 million in the US and Canada, well below expectations. Industry analysts are already predicting it could lose Disney over $100 million when all is said and done. For a company that relies on nostalgia to drive ticket sales, that's a brutal blow, especially when you remember this was supposed to be one of the tentpole releases of the year. So what does this say about where Hollywood is right now? It says that people are tired of being lectured by movies. They want to be entertained, not scolded, not preached to, not guilt-tripped. They want the stories they love to feel like the stories they remember, not something unrecognizable wearing the same name. The failure of Snow White is more than just a flop at the box office. It's a turning point, a wake-up call. And not just for Disney. Studios across the board are watching what happened here and taking notes. Because the lesson is simple. Change is good, but only when it comes from a place of creativity, not fear of backlash. When you start creating art just to avoid criticism, you end up with exactly what this film became: bland, defensive, and divisive. In trying so hard to be everything to everyone, Snow White ended up being nothing to anyone. And maybe that's why Bill Maher's takedown hit so hard. He wasn't just calling out a bad movie. He was pointing to a larger problem, one that's been building for years. The tension between modern values and classic storytelling. The fear of offending versus the freedom to imagine. And most importantly, the idea that maybe, just maybe, not every old story needs to be rewritten to fit today's mold. So where does that leave us? Maybe it's time for Hollywood to stop fixing what isn't broken. Maybe audiences are ready for something bold and original again. Or maybe we just want fairy tales to feel like fairy tales, full of magic, romance, and wonder, not press conferences in disguise. The Snow White saga is a mess of marketing missteps, studio panic, and social media chaos. But at the heart of it is a simple question: what kind of stories do we actually want to see? And as this film quietly disappears from theaters, one thing is clear: audiences have already given their answer. If you made it this far, I want to know what you think. Was Rachel Zegler unfairly criticized? Did Disney go too far trying to modernize a classic? Or is this exactly the wake-up call Hollywood needed? Drop your thoughts in the comments, we read everyone. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that bell icon so you never miss a story that's shaking up the industry.